Hello, it's Paul with All About Neurofeedback, and today I'm with Dr. Paola Porrone. Porrone?
Peroni, it's Italian,
Porrone.
so
Okay,
we
sorry
like
about
to
that.
enunciate the
I should know
vowels.
that by now. I mean, we've known each other for what, 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah. Oh, I
Um,
think it's five for sure. Yeah.
yeah, and they have her and her husband have a clinic in Parker, Colorado, and they do a lot of things. And I just wanted to, maybe you could just start out talking a little bit about, your business and how you've helped people, and a little bit about yourself. That'd be great. I know you're a fellow
Absolutely.
Canadian as well, so
Yes. Yeah. Actually, my folks were born and raised in Italy. They migrated to Canada. I was born and raised there, and then when I decided to go to Cairo school, I moved down to Texas, which is where I met my husband, who is also my business partner. So my undergrad degree was actually in political science, and I wanted
oh
to
wow.
actually become, yeah, I actually wanted to become an attorney back then. And I decided to take some time off between undergrad and possibly law school. And because it was the first casino that ever opened up in Canada, opened up very close to me. And so I got a job there. I was only going to work through the summer, maybe a year. Before I knew it, it was almost 5 years. Well, it was 3 years when I came to my senses and I was like, what am I doing? I'm working in a casino. And at that point though, I was like, I don't want to be an attorney anymore. That's not for me. And so I went back to school for neuroscience. And so I was taking all kinds of neuroscience classes. And one day I was just flipping through the course catalog and I saw chiropractic. I'd never even heard of it before. And
Really?
so
Wow.
yes, yeah. So I thought, what is this? And I knew that if it had anything to do with neurology, that I wanted to pursue it. So I started seeing a chiropractor on my own volition. And I mean, I was amazed. The neuro exam he did on me, I was like, wow, nobody's ever done anything like this before on me. And I was probably in my mid 20s. I never really complained about pain. But when I started seeing him, I just started feeling good, like always good, And I was like, I didn't even know that I didn't feel good before. Anyway, so that's what got me actually into chiropractic. And long story short, went through school, met my husband. We go to Colorado here, and we start a practice. And within maybe 2, 3 years, I have a few patients and they're talking about their kiddos with ADD and anxiety. And they're like, have you ever heard of neurofeedback? And I was like, I may have heard of it before, but I don't know much about it. So this is the kind of person I am. If it has to do with neurology, I want to look it up. So I start researching it and I'm impressed. I'm like, wow, this is like something really neat. And it's actually chiropractic that brought me back around to it, which is cool. Um, and so I found a local clinic, and I told this family, I said, why don't you take your daughters here? I checked her out. I said, she seems like she knows what she's doing. She's been doing it for a long time. And for years, I would send people to this doctor that I didn't even know, but I was getting these patients would come back and say, it's incredible. It's helping my daughter's ADD. It's helping with our anxiety. And I just kept sending patients to this lady.
That's awesome.
And then I know. And then one day, my husband and I went to a conference, a chiropractic conference. I think it was in Las Vegas. And we're going around and looking at all the vendors. And I see this neurofeedback device. And I said to my husband, I said, this is the machine that this doctor uses. I said, I want to check it out. So it was just kind of like a God thing. Like it just fell in our lap, right? And so I checked it out. We both looked at it and we shortly thereafter, I was like, I want to do this, And so we got a unit and it sat on my shelf for a couple of years because I was pregnant at the time and I didn't have the time to learn more about it. And then I had a couple patients. I was like, you know what? I did a complimentary. I was like, I want to use this device and I want to use it on your boys because I knew they had a lot of neurobehavioral issues. And so I just started using it on them for free. And I treated them for free for probably a year and a half. But I saw some incredible changes with them. And I said, I'm really going to dive into this, So that's kind of how I got into it. in our practice, it is a big part of what we do. But as you mentioned as well, there's so many other things that we do in our practice. Chiropractic, obviously, acupuncture. We have a phenomenal treatment for peripheral neuropathy. We have great treatments for plantar fasciitis. We tend to have the things in our office that people can't find answers for. They've been told you have to live with it. Or the only other option is a medication. And, if there's a more natural way to do something without medication, we're going to bring it into our practice, and we're going to help those people that, basically don't have a whole lot of hope. So,
Right.
sorry, that was like way out there.
That's good. I mean, you think of, like, I talk to a lot of neurofeedback providers, obviously, and it's a common thing that a lot of the people that come to them, they're at their end of the rope, right? They've tried everything else,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that neurofeedback and some of the other treatments we're talking about isn't the first line rather than the last line, But nature of the world, I mean, people, what's making the companies a lot of money, like the pharmaceuticals and the doctors, right? And
Right.
not that I'm anti-doctor, I say that every
No,
time I
me
bring it
neither.
up, right?
And I'm not
It's just that
anti-medicine either.
exactly. But I think just seeing what's happened with neurofeedback over the years that I've been involved with it and how it's helped people is pretty amazing. It's an amazing technology, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I can't, my husband always jokes around because he helps so many people on the chiropractic side of things, physical medicine side of things. And he'll be like, yeah, but you're changing people's lives, And I said, yeah, but so are you,
Yeah.
but it is, especially the kids, like we teach them at a young age, don't do drugs, but except for this one, you could do this one, and that's, in my personal opinion, an 8-year-old, number one, should not have anxiety, first of all. Number two, you should not put that child on a medication at the age of 8 years old, So, yeah, so I'm 100% in agreement with that.
Yeah.
So,
So
yeah.
I noticed that, I was looking at your Google business profile here today before our interview. I didn't realize you have 143 five-star reviews. How have you done that? I mean, you must do an amazing job for clients and patients, say.
I'll say the first thing is we don't give up. As long as the patient isn't going to give up, we're not going to give up.
Right.
And we're really proud of our reputation, and we go above and beyond to ensure that we've done everything we possibly can to help this person. So,
Right.
And we build really good relationships with them too. I don't want people to get better and never even come visit me or email me. We want to hear about your lives, So, so we try
Right.
to stay in touch with patients as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you, with neurofeedback, you mentioned that you really see a lot of success with kids, right, or younger people. But I imagine that you help people in many different ways. What do you find neurofeedback to be really effective for?
Um, I would say concussion's probably one of my favorite things.
Okay.
So yeah, I know. It's phenomenal. We know this for ADD. And a lot of adults have ADD and just don't even realize it.
Yeah.
So with concussion, we do some really good metrics before to get kind of like a baseline, and then we can check that out later on as well. Anxiety's been big in our office, and unfortunately, since COVID, it's rampant.
Yeah.
Everybody has it, right? I mean, I love just helping peak performers as well.
Yeah.
People who like you should be able to use this as a preventative measures as well, or just to get your brain working better. Because I think my personal opinion and professional opinion, the worst thing to develop would be Alzheimer's, dementia, something like that. And I feel like if you are on some sort of a neurofeedback brain training type schedule, even if it's like once every few months or something, some kind of a maintenance type thing, that you can slow down the progression of that, or even, avoid it.
Yeah.
And then I do have a few stroke patients that I do enjoy working with. Everybody's different, so hard to say how much they'll be able to come back, but I
Yeah.
enjoy working with them.
Yeah.
So
And then there's like kind of, I guess, more on ones that you haven't really thought of, like chemo brain. You know, that's something as well, right? You know,
Yes, yes.
and
Brain
then long
fog,
COVID, you know,
right?
I mean,
Yeah, you
these
know
all
what?
these things
You're
that are
right.
going on in the world right now, right?
I
You
haven't
know,
even thought about, but you're absolutely right. It's interesting you said chemo because neuropathy, you know, a lot of patients get neuropathy from chemotherapy as well.
oh,
And we've had, yeah, and we've actually had a number of patients doing that Sunexus treatment I told you about before, that it's totally resolved it, which is great.
that's
So,
awesome.
but yes, 100% you could use it for that. For
Well, I
sure.
had a client that one of her clients was working with a lady that fairly high profile career got COVID, and she didn't come back. Like her mentality changed. She wasn't able to focus, and you know, she had these cognitive issues. And you know, she worked with Julia for a bit, and it completely fixed it. Gave a really nice video testimonial, but it changed her life back to where it was, which was pretty cool, right?
That is
So,
incredible.
so there's some things out there. I think that neurofeedback is going to hopefully, you know, with all of us kind of working together here, and that's kind of the purpose of all about neurofeedback, is to really bring this to the public and get them to know how this can really change people's lives. And
Right.
it does, right?
In a
And you see
good,
it every
positive
day,
way.
you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
every day.
So in your words, how would you say, like, how would you describe neurofeedback? How does it work? What is it? What's it like?
um, well, I think most people that come into our office really enjoy it. So it's more fun and enjoyable. It's not work per se. So obviously we do a full intake initially to kind of determine different patterns because different patterns reflect different conditions. And it's not always, but most of the time the probability will say, hey, this is an anxiety pattern and this is a memory issue pattern and so forth. So once we gather all the data, then we set up a protocol for the neurofeedback. And in our office, neurofeedback is the cornerstone of what we do for our brain training, but we have many other different therapies and techniques that we actually add into it. So the two main neurofeedbacks that we do, I should say, there's four that we use in our office. So the EEG, which is what I think most people are familiar with, is where you have leads on your head and your brain waves are just being read. We're not putting anything into your brain. They're just being read. And the technology is just checking your brain waves every couple minutes and it's going to update your performance as well. So as you're watching a movie, if your brain is doing what we need it to do, so that protocol, if it's meeting the requirements for the protocol, then the movie will play for you. But every time that your brain decides to go back to its old ways, either too fast, too slow, whatnot, then the movie's gonna dim. We used to make it pause, but people got annoyed with that. so we just make it dim now. And sometimes it'll be really dark, which tells us that your brain's way off right now, or it might just be a little flicker in and out. What's great about that is you will watch as you progress through the sessions that it's less frequent, it's not as dark, and so forth. Of course, then we'll change it and then you're back to where you started. So I'm just kidding. You're not back to where you started, but you'll notice that because, well, we want to address the whole brain, not just one area, right?
Right.
So, so that's the EEG, and then we also do hemoencephalography, so HEG neurofeedback, where we have the little box on the forehead and the temperature of your forehead's being read. That signifies to us how much oxygen is actually getting to your brain. So as you're watching the movie, same thing. If your brain is getting enough blood flow to the frontal lobe, the movie will play for you. But every time that your blood decides to take a little vacation, then the movie's going to dim. This is phenomenal for kiddos. It's great for, stroke patients, anxiety, ADD. If anybody, I know you know Dr. Amen, but Dr. Amen, he does those SPECT scans, so they're blood flow tests. And what he's found through the hundreds of thousands of tests that he's done is that a lot of people that have these neurocognitive, neurobehavioral issues tend to not get enough blood flow, not enough oxygen to their brain. So it's a great way to get more oxygen to your brain. It is much easier for children because their physiology hasn't been set for 20, 30, 40 years. It's
Right.
definitely a little bit more challenging for adults. Um, Then we also use micro Tesla, and micro Tesla is similar to PEMF, only it's on a much smaller scale. So it's great to help your neurons make more ATP, make more energy, and it's really good for healing. And then the last one is Loretta, which is basically more deeper structures as well. So it's the same idea though for each one of those is you're watching a movie, and as long as your brain is following what we need it to do, the movie will play. If not, the movie will dim, and there'll be different variations of that. So in a nutshell, a big nutshell, that's how I would describe neurofeedback.
Okay.
Over time, it's great because your brain is learning and it's learning a pattern. Something I do tell patients is just watch the movie. There's your mind and there's your brain. And right now, your brain is taking control of your mind, and we need to flip the switch. So let's let your brain learn this pattern, not necessarily your mind, because we want to change the brain. There's nothing wrong with your mind. We need to change the functionality
so you don't
of
have
the
to
brain.
think about it when you're sitting there receiving your feedback, right?
Exactly.
A good analogy is like, you know, if you're working out and you progress and you get better and stronger, it's the same thing for your brain, right?
Right. Lock in those patterns.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Neuroplasticity. Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah.
I think that's when you think about how that can help somebody, it seems simplistic, but it also makes sense, right? And I know it's not simplistic, okay, but it just
Right.
seems like it. Okay, so you're just training your brain, it's getting, you know, stronger, right? It's a
Yeah.
simple concept, right? But it makes sense because the rest of our bodies work that way. Why not our brain, right?
Exactly.
You know,
Absolutely. And like you said, it seems so simplistic. But I couldn't even begin to tell you what's, the science and the technology, like what it does. It's just incredible. But that's, I wouldn't even be able to explain that to you because it's not as simplistic as it looks.
right?
Yeah.
So out of, 100 people that you do neurofeedback for, how many do you think would have the success they're looking for?
Like on a percentage, you mean?
Yeah, like a
Or
percentage. What kind of percentage would you say people achieve that
you
success?
know, I would say significant. And I can say that pretty confidently because we do so many objective measurements beforehand. So, like, we'll do that cognitive assessment, we'll do a timing assessment, we do an eye tracking assessment, the brain map, obviously. And you can see people's cognitive function go from like the fourth percentile all the way up to the 70th percentile. So if I had to give a number, because sometimes it's hard to give a number, but I would say everybody that has come in for neurofeedback in our office has improved. Everybody has improved. The percentage wise, like how much improvement varies, but it's still up there. We're up like anywhere from 70 to 90, 95%. So
Right.
some people are like, we've had a couple, something I didn't mention is migraines. We've had phenomenal success with migraines. People that have had them for 10 years every single day, and then they go through the program and they don't have migraines anymore. So
Yeah.
and I just had a 15-year-old boy, and it took, I kept saying, just stick with it, just stick with it. And it took him all the way, 30 sessions before they were completely gone. So it just takes time. And I think sometimes, most people that are in the neurofeedback world understand that it usually takes 40 sessions to make things permanent. And that's why we're doing it, right? We don't want these things to come back. But, when are you going to see your symptoms resolve? Could be anywhere from 10, 15, 30, 40, 50. It depends, what we're treating. And not necessarily just that, it depends on the patient as well. Because if, you've had this for 20 years, I would love to say, and I would hope that I can help you resolve it in 6 months, but we don't know for
Well,
sure,
even
right?
with like, I would think that it's got a lot to do with lifestyle choices they make as well, right? Like if they're, trying to stay away from the stressors and they're improving their diet and supplements and that sort of thing, I would imagine that's going to drastically shorten the time that it takes to get the resolution they're looking for,
I would
right?
say 100%. So yeah, I always say diet is foundational.
Hmm.
It's kind of like the human body and brain. There's nothing like it. There will, people's can spend millions of dollars on a car. Okay. You'll never be able to replace this. What kind of fuel do we put in $1 million car? Like the best fuel. Of course, I'm not going to put the chintzy stuff. Well, that's how we have to look at the human body and the brain. You can't put poor fuel in the greatest machine in the world,
Right.
So that comes down to diet and food and supplements. I would also like to say that, if you ate perfectly, you're getting all the nutrients you need. But you and I both know to get the same amount of nutrients from carrots today that you could get 30 years ago, you would have to eat 100 carrots today to equal 1 carrot 30, 40 years ago. Just we've depleted the resources, right? So we're not getting the nutrients from our food. So supplements are almost a necessity in most cases as well.
Right.
Exercise as well. You have to move your body to get your brain working as well. So yes,
I
there's a
had
whole lot.
my
And then,
mother, my mother's, I followed David Asprey from Bulletproof for
oh
years.
yeah, I love them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got on the Bulletproof coffee train way back when. I don't really do it as much now. I don't think you need, like, seems like at the beginning, your body craves this extra fat, right?
Yes.
When you
Yeah.
start doing that. But over time, it seems like it levels out a bit. But my mother, I got her on it quite a while ago. It really helped her mentally. And then she stopped doing it. And we don't live in the same neighborhood anymore. She's in BC, we're in Alberta. But I was talking to her the other day. She's struggling, right? And she's in her 80s. So I got her back on the bulletproof coffee, fasting till dinner time, getting rid of all the carbs that aren't working for her. And
Right.
within a few days, I'm feeling a lot better and she's more
That's
with
good
it,
too.
brain's working better. So I know that those things make a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the neurofeedback, I've seen it work in my own family. We had a small clinic for a while, you know, but yeah, it's pretty wild. One thing that I think to emphasize as well is that I think the medical world and the psychiatric world looks at mental health disorders, I guess you could say, as chemical imbalances,
Right.
whereas neurofeedback providers and people that really understand these things look at it more as electrical imbalances. Would you agree with that?
Yes. I would 100% agree with that for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. It just, that's just, if you know much about the history of psychiatry in this country, I don't know if you do.
I
Um,
don't.
and I don't
Aside
know the
from the
exact,
scary movies I've seen, right?
I know. Um, the, I don't remember the year, the timeline, but the medical profession went to psychiatrists and said, well, you're not real doctors because you don't prescribe medicine. And that's when everything kind of switched, right? So then they started delving into, the different medications. And what a huge disservice, unfortunately, most, and I can't say all, obviously, but psychiatrists used to be, hey, sit on my couch, let's talk, right?
Yeah,
Now it's more of, unfortunately, and they're not all like this, but a vast majority in this country, they just write scripts, and so if you actually want to talk about your problems, you're going to more likely go to a psychologist or a social worker, that sort of stuff.
yeah,
And here's the other thing, every other system in the body or physician in the country, if we're going to look at your liver enzymes to decide if you need, if something's going on with your liver, do you need a specific like cholesterol lowering medication? So they do some kind of testing like blood work, CAT scan, MRI, whatever. Every other physician, not including psychiatrists, look at some kind of imaging or blood work, some kind of testing. Most psychiatrists do not, right? They don't do an EEG of the brain unless, okay, this person might have seizures. They don't do an MRI or a CAT scan unless, okay, they fell, or there's real reason to do it. So I think that's the unfortunate thing as well. We need to be doing more QEEGs, more brain testing, actual testing before we say, hey, here's a med for you. And we know in neurofeedback, there's, because there's 7 different types of ADD, if somebody has, and what I found in our practice is that people who have ADD that tend to come in our office also have anxiety, and they might not know how to say they have anxiety, or they might not even know that they have it. But the problem with that type of neurofeedback, or I'm sorry, that type of ADD, is that we typically are going to put people on Ritalin, right? Some kind of a speed type of drug, because ADD in the simplest sense means, well, your brain just can't pay attention. So your brain waves must be just down and low, not good. But if they have way too many slow waves, way too many fast waves, and we're giving them speed, that's a recipe for disaster, right? Because their brain is already working too fast sometimes, and sometimes it's working too slow. With that particular type of ADD, it's almost like, and you can see that on EEG, it's almost like they have like so much happening in the brain that they can't see through the forest, right? So another reason why I think it's so important to at minimum do a QEEG or something, some sort of testing before we say, yeah, let's try this medication. Oh, that one didn't work. Let's try this one. It's like you could be doing so much damage, especially in a developing brain. I always go back to the kiddos because they shouldn't experience any chemicals until their brains are developed, So
Yeah. Well, as a parent, and especially at the time, my oldest son, when he was a teenager, severe ADHD. And my wife and I, we went to counselors, we went to courses. We actually sat in courses to learn about ADHD. We were desperate, right?
yeah, of course.
Um, and neurofeedback was completely unknown to us at the time, and nobody in our area or anybody we talked to knew anything about that. But I tell you, it was tough. And I went into, my Google, searching. Okay, I looked at it as research, right? But it really
Yeah,
was looking at different things. And I learned about all the medications that they prescribed for it. And I was really against it, but we just got so desperate. My So he went to a psychiatrist, and it's exactly like you said, right? 15 minutes and gets, I think it was Dexedrine. And and I fought it every step of the way, but he ended up doing it. But he only did it for a week. And he said, I can't do this. This isn't working. I don't like it. I don't like the way it makes me feel. And it
right.
was funny because at the same time I was using I did learn about brainwave entrainment. And so we were putting him on this Mind Alive system. It's
Oh
like a
yeah,
brainwave entrainment device.
right.
And he was getting results from that, right? And I'm wondering if that might have helped him realize that maybe that Dexter wasn't the right thing for him, right?
Yeah,
But he's like married, and his wife's becoming a lawyer, and I mean they're doing pretty good. But it was a tough time. And I look at
yeah,
neurofeedback. If I would have known about that, I would have moved heaven and earth to get him in there, because
right.
it would have been such a
Yeah,
gift, right?
right.
Not only to us as parents, but to him for his life, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so I just really encourage, parents to really pay attention to this stuff. And obviously for everybody else that this can help with, it can be, like you say, it's life altering, you know?
It is. Yeah. And, I ask people too, like, okay, how long have you been on this medication, whatever it might be? Okay. What's the exit plan? When are you supposed to get off of it? And um, because if medications worked, we shouldn't need to continue to take them. It's like an antibiotic. Kill the infection. Let's move on. But these are, you know, maintenance drugs. And a lot of people that have been on anxiety meds or antidepressants for 20 years, they still have anxiety and they still have depression. So what's the exit plan? And we know they all have side effects. And if there's no exit plan, well, we need to figure out an exit plan, because that's not something you want to be on forever. I was talking to a patient yesterday about some medications that they're on, And, you know, a lot of our, the ingredients to make the medications come from overseas. Now, what if something happens and you can't get those supplies, right? Because we've already seen something happen a few years ago. So I think it's important that we educate people. And like you said, neurofeedback is not a bad thing. There's nothing bad to be said about it, right? It's anybody can benefit from it. And so I think if you've been on any kind of mind, brain altering type of medication, we need to talk, you know?
I think
So,
it's really important to say here too that, you know, as we're talking about medication and the side effects and, you know, the bad side of it, I'm sure there's many times where it can be life-saving as well, right?
of
It's just
course, yeah,
that you shouldn't rely on that. That shouldn't be your, and so when
exactly.
somebody starts neurofeedback and if they're on medication, you know, don't get off your medication. Make sure you're
Right.
working with your doctor on that so that, you know, you can wean yourself off as you go, right? And I'm sure that's
I
what
would,
you do as well.
yeah, yeah. I would never tell anybody to get off their
Yeah,
medication. I
yeah,
usually tell them at the start of neurofeedback, say within the first 10 sessions, you need to contact your physician who prescribes this medication for them and just let them know what you're doing and that they may need to alter the actual dosage because you may not need as much, you know? So
yeah,
that's, you know, and ideally you go through the program and you continue to consult with the prescribing physician, and ideally, eventually, you might be able to get off of it. Yeah, I
right.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like I said. There's like everybody goes through bouts of depression, um, and it's, you know, ideally you can bounce back. You know, but if not, again, you know, if you're considering something extreme, um, you might need some medication temporarily, right? But the
right.
idea is let's get your brain healthy enough where you won't need it, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah,
There's so many roads that we could go down on that, right? But I don't
I
want
know.
to turn this
I know.
into some kind of
I know.
conspiracy thing, right? But you know,
Yeah.
you see, yeah, I mean, no, I won't even go there. But I know with children and teenagers, being on medication like that is a scary thing, right? It really can be, and people aren't really aware of that, you know,
Yeah.
right?
You should, I don't know if you've read this book yet. It's called Confessions of an RX Pusher by
No,
Gwen Olson. You should read that book. But it talks about her niece in there, and it was a sad story, but she's on a mission now to educate people, is what I'll say. But you should read it,
right.
and then we'll talk
Thank you
about
for
it.
the, what was that called again? The Confessions of an RX Pusher.
Confessions of an RX Pusher, a
Okay.
prescription pusher. Yeah,
Well, I tell
yeah,
you, it's so easy to go down these rabbit holes, but when it comes to, you know, what you do for people, that's what we're really focused on here. So,
yeah,
do you have a story or two from clients that you've seen just incredible transformations from?
yeah. Okay, yeah, I got a few. um, I'll pick on this one. This when he first came in to see us, he was 28 years old, and he was diagnosed as Asperger's. And now they kind of lump it all on in autism, but back then, diagnosed as Asperger's. He still lived at home, couldn't do a whole lot on his own. He couldn't be in social situations. Just getting to the office a couple times a week was difficult for him at the beginning. And this may seem small to some people, but it was a huge deal for the family. Whenever his mother would bring him into the office, and they drove a solid 35, 40 minutes to come see us, the first thing mom would do would turn the radio off because he couldn't handle the sound. And maybe 10, 15 sessions in, um, mom was ready to turn the radio down. And he looked at her and he said, "No, I want you to keep it on today. I think it's actually good for me." And I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, but his mom was in tears, like, because it is a big deal. He couldn't handle that sort of stimulation before, and now he can. And fast forward, because this was probably at least 10 years ago, He now writes articles for a local community paper, and that was never even a thought that was something that he could do. So that's one of my faves. Another fella, he unfortunately had a stroke and he lost full use of his left leg and arm. When he came to us, it was about 8 months after his stroke. He had been doing PT, OT, and he was making progress, but he got to a plateau and he wasn't getting any better. He was still in his wheelchair. And so they started seeing us, and within probably about 20 sessions, he had gone back to PT and OT, and they were checking some things out for him. And they said, "What have you been doing in the last 2, 3 months?" And he told them, they said, "Because you've progressed so much." By the time he left our office, he was actually able to stand and walk. You can tell he's had a stroke, but he can walk now. His wife was ecstatic because he could wash dishes, I know. But like, doesn't even use a chair anymore, and again, that was probably about 12 years ago. I remember that fella. What else? We've had, again, I know I have so many. This one fella, he basically, so his mom was living in Colorado, but he was living in Utah. And he had a basement apartment, and he never left. He could work from home. So he worked on computers, obviously, and he never left his home. He had chronic migraines. I mentioned that earlier, like every single day. Became a hermit, and he was only maybe 25. And his mom had, found out about us, and she came in and did a consult with me, and I told her how I thought we could help. She's like, "I'm going to make him come live with me for the time while he does neurofeedback." And he had come, and he was doing it because he didn't want to have to stay here for too long. He was doing 4 to 5 a week. And within 20, 30 sessions, migraines completely gone. And I didn't realize what an impact it made until I did like a little testimonial with his mom. And I said, I was asking her questions, and she said, "It's amazing to be able to hear your son laugh for the first time in 10 years. Laugh." And then she said, "And I took him because his niece had a baby." And she said, "I took him to the toy store because he wanted to get her something. First of all, for him to want to buy something for someone else, to actually go out of the house to do that, unheard of. But then when they were actually in the store, he was grabbing the teddy bears and holding them to see which one was softest." And she said he never, in the last 10 years, that is never something that he would even consider, like, first thinking about somebody else, secondly, actually wanting the softest one for somebody else. So she told me that on video, and I cried. I cried because I was like, "Oh, that's awesome." As a mom, you're like, to not be able to hear your kids laugh, I like, every time I hear my kids laugh, because they're now, 14 and almost 16, I almost want to record it. And it brings me such joy, because, soon enough they're going to be gone. You don't get to hear it much, but, so that was really impactful for the family, but for me too, so yeah.
That's awesome. How does it make you feel when you see those changes? It must be kind of emotional for you too, eh?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Especially, like I said, especially if it's a child, everybody's a child, obviously. Somebody gave birth to you. But yeah, sometimes I'll get weepy eyed, but it's joy, it's complete joy. It just makes me
For
so
sure.
happy because it's, when they're young, it's like I can just envision what their life is going to be like now, different, than it was going to be, and when they're 28 years old and now they can get out of the house and meet people, which we know how important socialization is. Yeah, it's why I love what I do, and I don't think
Right.
I'll ever stop doing this. My husband, I don't do much of the chiropractic anymore. And he'll always try to pull me over. And I was like, no, I love this stuff. This is where my focus is. Every time people can see it in the office too. Every time I talk any kind of neuro, my face lights up because I love it, and I love how it can impact people's lives. So
For sure. That's awesome. So you help people in the office, so you're not really doing distance things like some neurofeedback providers at this point. Um, how do you get started with how would someone get started with you? What does it look like? Does it start with a free consultation, I think is what you do, right? Over the phone?
yeah, yeah, we definitely love, and anybody who's coming into our office, no matter what they're coming in for, I like to sit with them either on the phone or in person and just talk about, okay, let's talk about all your concerns, all your health concerns. And because there's so many things we can do in the office, I like to figure out what works best for the people. So a complimentary consultation always. For neurofeedback patients, if they want to actually experience what a session feels like, then I will give them a complimentary session as well. Just so they can get an idea of, like, it's not as scary as it seems. You're playing with my brain, just so they can see that, what it feels like. Some people will say, wow, I never slept. Even after one session, they'll say, I slept so good that night. Or, I felt like I wasn't as reactive. I actually have a couple of my employees, some team members. I just talked to them a couple days ago, and one of them said, I used to be, when I would fight with my daughter or my husband, very reactive. Like, they would say something and I would come back, and it'd be back and forth, back and forth. And now both of them, it was so crazy. On the same day, two of them said to me, now it's like I actually think about it before I respond, or if I don't think I can say something that's going to help the situation, I just walk away. And
That's
some
the
people
same
might,
with addictions too, right?
right.
Because I've
Yeah.
heard, from somebody that went through neurofeedback that had some severe addictions, they told me that it allowed them to be, instead of just reaching for whatever it was they were addicted to stop and think first,
Yes.
right?
So yes. And
You know,
another client I had, she was coming in for, well, she had anxiety, she had attention, all sorts of stuff, but her biggest thing was addiction. And she never really made that seem like it was the big deal. I knew it was. Um,
right.
but just a couple days ago, she also told me, she said, because she was talking to another patient about neurofeedback, and she said that was the turning point for me, because she had done the 7 steps, she had done, or 12 steps. She had done this, she had done that. And not that any of that is not beneficial, it is. But she said what really made her turn the corner was neurofeedback. And she said, I will always have a special place for you because of how you changed my life. And I mean, she does not touch the stuff anymore, and which is phenomenal. I'm getting a little teary eyed again.
Yeah.
So, um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
guess, so part of these interviews and, is obviously to introduce, the public to neurofeedback and the various practitioners. But for me, it's like, I love hearing these stories, I really do.
yeah, I do too. And it's just reaffirms, what we're doing too. And just,
Yeah.
and it can help. I mean, it can help anybody. And like I said, and it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you either. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. This just makes your brain work better. And who doesn't want that? you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. Especially once you realize that the brain controls your whole body. It
Exactly.
really controls every aspect of your life, right?
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know, so, well, that's awesome. Is there anything that you would like to kind of end on?
Um, I don't know. I don't
Not really?
know.
Okay. Well, so you offer the free consultation,
Yes.
and if they want to check it out a bit further, you also are willing to do a free session for somebody, which is awesome. So we'll link this to your profile, and
Okay.
your profile will go to your website and the various things that you can do. And and I guess that would be one of the ways to get in touch with you, is to
Yeah.
book a
Yeah.
book an appointment, contact you through the website or email or phone, and just have a conversation. right?
Right. And that's, yeah, let's just figure out what, what you're looking for, what your goals are, what, there's so many things that it's beneficial for that you couldn't even imagine, right? And I
Right.
will say one other thing is that I love objective measurements. So our intake process is like if you're actually going to come in and do the brain mapping and all the testing, it's pretty involved. It's about 3 hours long. Um, because we do the brain map, we do the cognitive assessment is a computer-based test. You probably know it's the NSBS.
Yeah.
So we do that, and then I mentioned we do the in interactive metronome. We do the timing assessment with that. We use a right eye to do the eye tracking assessment, and then I do a neuro exam. And one of the main things that I'm looking for during the neuro exam are primitive reflexes. That's not something I really touched on, but um, the primitive reflexes are those reflexes that we're born with, but by the time you're 18 months old, they should go away. And I shouldn't say go away, they reintegrate into your nervous system. And if you still have those primitive reflexes, it keeps your body in a state of fight or flight, which 90% of the people I encounter, that's where they're at. And the problem is if you're in fight or flight, you're sympathetic all the time. You're not in parasympathetic, right? Which parasympathetic is rest, digest, repair. It's the only place you can heal. So if we have such an imbalance between those two as well, you're not going to be able to heal. So we check those primitive reflexes because, like I said, there's survival mechanisms for when you're born, because you don't know what's going on, obviously, but those are
Yeah.
supposed to integrate into your nervous system. So we
Okay.
do a
So very thorough. You're very thorough,
yeah, I love
which
it.
probably reflects that 143 5-star reviews.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
That's awesome. Well, we'll say goodbye privately. But for everybody that's watching this, I just wanted you to hear from Dr. Peroni.
Thank you.
Do a lot of people call you Dr. Paola like I do?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, I
and a lot
kind of
of
thought so.
people, a lot will just call me Dr. P because it's easier,
Dr.
and
P,
and
yeah.
I don't mind. My name has been messed up through my life, so it's no biggie.
Right. No
Yeah,
worries. That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on board with me today and sharing your story. It was great to hear. And even after I've known you for 5 years, there was a lot of new things here for me to know about you guys as well.
Oh,
It was great.
thanks. Yeah, it's always
Yeah.
a pleasure with you too, Paul. So thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Thank you.